Today I'm going to be doing a how-to on soldering brass. First step is to go over the materials that you're going to need to do this. First thing you're going to need, you'll save this for last, need a plastic bristle brush and then some soap for water cleanup later. I like to get a pair of needle nose for handling the brass parts because they will get hot, so you're going to need something to hold on to them. You're going to need solder. This is available at electric and hardware stores. A couple different gauges here I have. I use the fine gauge for smaller parts and the large gauge for larger parts to solder. You will need flux. This is found at hardware stores as well. This is frequently used by plumbers for soldering together plumbing, copper plumbing. It also works great for brass. That's what this is. You will need a torch for any small, medium, and large parts. Any super fine parts, I like to use a soldering iron. You will need your brass pieces that you want to solder together. And you also need various grits of sandpaper. This is about 200 grit, about 120, and then 60 grit. The second step in our process here is sanding and prep work. For solder to work well, there has to be a mechanical bond. So you want to make sure that this little piece of round stock that I want to connect to this plate here, you want to make sure there's a good bond. So bottom of this rod here, we want to make sure we rough it up with some medium grit sandpaper here, just to make sure we have a good rough surface to work with. And then this plate here, it's manufactured very smooth. It's also got some scale and corrosion on it, so we want to make sure we knock all that off. And as you can see there, it's significantly brighter there where I've sanded it, and that's good. You want to take off all that corrosion. And that's the basis of prep work. You also want to knock down any burrs that you might have on the metal. Now, the third step in soldering brass is applying flux and putting the solder where you want it. So how flux works is that it's basically an agent that allows the solder to flow into certain areas. So when wherever the flux is where the solder will go. So solder will not go where you don't have flux. So in the case of trying to put this piece of round stock onto this plate, what we want to do is we want to take our little piece of round stock here, put it into our flux here, get it good and coated on the end. Maybe get a little bit of extra there. And in this case, we can go ahead and just put it right on top of the plate there. Smear it around a little bit. Get a nice little dot on there. You can see the flux there. That little brown paste. Kind of looks like earwax there on the plate. Nice thing about flux is it's a little bit sticky. So we can go ahead and put our round stock on there. See it there. Another thing your needle nose pliers are going to come in handy for. I've gone ahead and cut up little pieces of solder here. They're really small. I'm using a fine gauge solder for this part, for this little job here. See the little piece of solder there in my needle nose? Go ahead and put that right there. I go ahead and do the solder this way, so that way once the metal reaches temperature, that solder will melt right into that flux. So I go ahead and put that solder right into that flux there. So you can see the little pieces of solder I've cut off, and I put them directly into the flux there. Go ahead and grab one more little piece here. Just set it right in there. This works great for little butt joints like this, where you have one piece butting up against another. For these exhaust stacks I'm building here, they've got to be A little trickier. I like to go ahead and, since it's tube, I like to get solder on both ends of the tube here. So you can see, or excuse me, not solder, but flux on both ends of the tube, like so and so. And then that way there we are sure that we've got flux on both ends of it. Butt them together like so. And then I go ahead and apply my piece of solder here, right on top of that joint there. And then hopefully we'll have success with that once we heat it. Alright, the fourth step in soldering brass is applying the heat. This is when the magic happens. We're going to take our little torch here and we're going to heat up both pieces of metal. Try and heat it up evenly until we want to see this this solder melt here. And it'll happen quick. It'll basically follow the path of that flux that we put down. It shouldn't go anywhere else. Let's go ahead and start our torch. Make sure you read your safety manual on eye protection for this. And you can see my blue flame there. Make sure you keep that tip of that blue flame right on the pieces of metal there. And then as soon as you see that little puddle form and see it form around it, remove the heat. You have already, if you continue to apply heat, you'll overheat it, and then you won't get a good bond between the pieces of metal. And this is when your needle nose pliers come in handy here. Pick it up and show it to you. You can see that nice little puddle that we got around the edge there. Very quick. And these two pieces are firmly joined together. I cannot pull them apart whatsoever. Soldering creates a very strong bond between brass parts. So I'll show you our other example here of my exhaust stack that we're working on. Give it a try. This is a much more challenging solder. So we'll see what we get here. Same as before, apply our heat. See if we can't get it to join up. Oops. There it went. This one's going to be hard to see on camera here. There's a very small little bit of solder there that's run into that joint there, right in between the two pieces of bent metal. You can see a little bit more on this side. That's where the magic happens right there. Okay, once you've allowed for sufficient time to cool for your parts so they're no longer hot to the touch, it's time to do some step 5 in this process, and that's more sanding. Oftentimes, even with this butt weld here, see it looks fairly clean on this side, a little bit of overrun there, but if we flip the piece over, see that big puddle that's formed? Some of that solder did get away from me, even with the flux. It's because I had too much solder in there. This happens a lot. Even once you get good at it, you still have some overruns. So this is where your medium and fine grit sandpaper come in again. I like to knock this down with some medium grit. And then once you have it smoothed out, you'll take your fine grit and get it ready for whatever you're going to cover your model with. Most of my models I'm going to paint, so this 220 grit is perfect for what I need. Other sanding that you'll need to do on our little exhaust stack here. You can see that it's not a super good joint all the way around, so you want to take your fine grit sandpaper and just kind of lightly touch up some of that, some of those rough edges that are still present. Just slightly touch them up, and just get the joints that you've soldered ready for paint, so that the joints are no longer noticeable as if they never existed. Final step to soldering brass is a final cleanup. So once you've sufficiently sanded everything to what you need for paint, Last thing I like to do is to go ahead and clean up the parts, because there is a little bit of sticky residue left by the flux even after you've soldered. So I like to clean that up with some soap and water, and that's where this brush comes in, and your soap. I like to use a general hand soap. Just take this, it's actually called a fingernail brush is what it's called, and just give it a light scrubbing to your parts here. Remember, all your parts should be very durable if you've gotten a good solder joint. So if your joint comes apart, it's time to go back to soldering it. So go ahead and give it a good scrubbing here. And just go ahead and rinse it off. And I like to let them air dry, and then you're all done. You've gotten your first joint soldered. To wrap up building with brass, I'll just show you a couple of projects I've done. I built this stick here for the 385. I went ahead and built an exhaust and handrails and the sides to the dump bed on my D350 dump truck. Also worked on my Covering 1166 excavator. Built the stick, quick coupler, these hydraulic cylinders, boom, counterweight, entire undercarriage system, and parts of the cab. All these are great examples of what you can do with brass. The sky is the limit. Just take some practice to get it mastered and become a very good builder at it. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you want to see some other videos, model reviews, diorama updates, whatnot, go ahead and go to my Facebook page or stay tuned here on YouTube. Thanks for watching.